There are kids who are different from other children. They're wired differently, right? And they may have conditions like dyslexia or ADHD. And some of these kids really struggle through their academic educational years, especially in school. And what is expected of these kids who otherwise seemingly appear quite normal is, weighs them down in a big way. And many of these kids eventually slip towards depression, lot of mood swings, substance misuse, and eventually self-harm. %25 of young people will go through an episode of clinical depression, and here by this I don't mean sadness, disappointment, but the illness depression by the time they're 18. So that's one of the major causes of deliberate self-harm.
On Zen-Brain today, we have a very special guest, Ambuj, here to talk about self-harm. Not in any way to encourage the concept of self-harm, but to prevent it. So thank you very much for joining me on Zen-Brain.
Thank you for having me.
Ambuj, you've admitted to cutting yourself. When did this begin?
A few isolated incidents happened when I was 11. During that time, it was mainly as to get a rise out of people.
To shock people.
To shock people.
Cutting yourself hurts you. And
yeah.
Why did you feel the need to do it?
When I was 11, I used to ensure that the maximum visual effect happens for the least amount of pain. So I was a very enterprising child in that aspect. But when I used to start craving the pain, that happened much later at age 17. Then the cutting became a regular aspect, and one has to realize that pain is just like any other feeling, any other sensation, like taste. I mean, it's an uncomfortable sensation, but when you get down to the basics, pain is just an input from outside going into your system. People cut for many reasons, but why I did it was when every aspect of my life was spiraling out of control. 12th grade happened, so studies already spiraling out of control since the start. Relationships with friends became affected because everyone is stressed and everyone is snapping at each other. Friendships started going on a downward spiral. Then relationship with parents, with teachers. They expect 100 from you and 100 from you and a 90 from you, especially in the very competitive school I was a student of. At the end of the day, when everything was spiraling out of control, why I cut myself was that yes, I am causing this pain and I am in control of this area. It was to bring my mind back to reality, to feel like I have control over what I am feeling, what I am experiencing. It's not a healthy coping mechanism in any sense.
And you realized that at that time too, when you were doing it?
At the time, maybe I didn't realize the repercussions of it. Right now, I do. Because at the time, I thought it was better than being addicted to alcohol or any hard drug, but it's actually not. It's very much like being a drug addict, but that whenever you're stressed, you reach for the blade like a heroin addict reaches for his needle.
So when you were cutting yourself, did your parents know about it?
They got to know much later. So usually there used to be single cuts hidden. One day I cut myself in school. I was wearing a full sleeve white shirt and the sleeve got soaked in blood. Then I had to tell my parents. Thankfully I had therapy on that day, so I was able to go to the psychologist and then have a conversation with my parents in a safe manner, because otherwise I was planning to just keep hiding it all along.
So you started cutting yourself at age 11. When did you go to the psychologist and how?
So at age 11, the first few incidents happened. So then the school recommended a particular psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said there was nothing to worry about. It was just a coming of age thing. Then I went to boarding school for 2 years. There was certain downward spirals of my mental health. But then as well I was recommended to a psychologist who again didn't pay much heed to it. He just said that, again, perfectly normal behavior.
But you talked about cutting yourself and they dismissed it even then.
Again, it wasn't a regular thing and I didn't use it as a coping mechanism. It wasn't a coping mechanism for me back then. The main issue I had was with other aspects of my life. Cutting myself actually became a coping mechanism when I was 17, and that's thankfully when I started going to the therapist. But going to the therapist, my psychologist, began not because of cutting but because of 12th grade. Because there was a lot of academic pressure and it was mainly to manage the academic situation.
How were you as a student? Were you a good student? Were you an average student?
I like to think I was good. I wouldn't have been good without my mother. So I was diagnosed with ADHD at age 4. Left to my devices, I wouldn't have been able to study at all. But mom handheld me through a lot of academic curriculum, especially at school level. So in college level, critical thinking is a thing. So I can much more easily do curriculum work than when it was school level.
You were cutting yourself. You were diagnosed with ADHD at a very, very early stage. But if I was to ask you if you suffered any emotional trauma, do you think that you did when you were growing up?
Not before military school.
Okay, what happened at military school?
Military school, first of all, happened at a very important juncture in my age. I was 12 going on 13, and that is just when I'm going into adolescence, and it was a complete turnaround from the lifestyle I was used to.
More discipline.
More discipline. There were many more things to do in the day. There was no free time. There were academics to take care of, then there were sports, there was physical training, there was organizing all my stuff. So my shoes need to be polished, white shoes need to be washed, clothes need to be washed, ironed and folded at all times, and keeping all this organized along with the constant threat of punishments over your head. So there's a thing in military school that if one person messes up, the entire batch gets punished. It's tradition. It builds solidarity amongst the cadets, but it also means we get punished a lot more often, and often for no fault of ours.
It was not an enjoyable experience for you.
I wouldn't put a blanket statement like that, because yes, there were aspects of it which were enjoyable. When we won competitions, it was enjoyable. DJ nights, it was enjoyable. Yeah, it was very stressful.
The physical effort that you had to put in.
Not just the physical effort, but also the punishments. The punishments, the thing about physical effort is during the stipulated time of working out, the seniors and the batchmates were motivating, and we pushed each other to do better.
So there was a sense of camaraderie?
There was a sense of deep camaraderie, while during punishments, it was basically the seniors were pretty brutal, and it could have gone from bad to worse.
So did you self-harm while you were at military school?
Only to escape punishments. I did have a certain degree of what you can call depression there. It wasn't diagnosed, but yes, now that I've experienced it in a diagnosed state as well, I can tell that during that time I did have it.
You decided to leave it midway?
I didn't decide as much as it was decided for me that I wasn't mentally fit enough to be part of the military. So I was sent home. Thankfully got admission into one of the best institutes in Delhi.
But it must have been tough, right, to make that change?
It was tough because it was in 10th grade. In 10th grade, no schools give admission, but my school was kind enough to...
So you joined this school and you did pretty okay till you were in class 12. What happened then?
Class 12 is what I like to call an orgy of stress. So it's not just me. You talk to any person struggling with mental health issues, they will say class 12th was a time they broke. The teachers are stressing out the students in turn stress out the teachers, the parents stress out the students stress out the parents stress out other parents, teachers stress out other teachers, and students always stress out other students. So everyone is stressing everyone out. Parent-teachers meeting mein, even the teachers stress out the parents and the parents stress out the teachers. So it is a horrifying experience. It shouldn't be a normal state of affairs that before the board exam or the pre-board exam, people are vomiting out of stress the night before. While that is the case with many, many students. During 12th grade, because there was so much stress and because so many aspects of my life were spiraling out of control, because friends started getting angry at each other, snapping at each other, the teachers had such high expectations from our class, did make me nervous though. Made me feel like this gigantic trial by fire was approaching.
Did you cut yourself in class 12?
I did, and that's when it became a regular habit. It went on for a couple of months actually.
Did you talk to anyone about it?
Like I said, I talked to only when the situation became that I couldn't avoid talking about it, when the blood soaked into my white shirt sleeve.
So you were cutting yourself regularly. Your parents didn't know about it. Your friends, did you discuss it with your peer group?
Again, much, much later. So
it was just between you and yourself?
It was with me and myself. So it actually, the process was, I told my peer group. Few days later, the shirt sleeve incident happened. Then my parents got to know, and so on and so forth.
Did you look for help? Did you need help? Did you seek help?
During that time, I didn't feel like I needed help. I thought that this was the right way to manage. Because, you see, that's what happens. Even you ask an alcoholic if they're an alcoholic, they will never say yes. But
so how is it that nobody noticed that you had cuts in your arms?
Full sleeve. Because I started in winters.
So you didn't want anyone to know that you were doing it?
I definitely didn't, because I knew it would be a highly stressful situation. I knew there would be tons of drama afterwards, and I wanted to avoid that, but...
So you cut yourself through your childhood, starting from age 11. You went into this high-stress boarding school, military school. You came out, it was yet another high-stress environment, class 12, where you started cutting yourself regularly. Now, one would think that something happened in your childhood to enable you to do this.
Everyone expects a great, tragic sob story, but...
You didn't have one.
That's not always available. I didn't have one. I had a perfectly normal childhood.
You had a happy childhood?
I had a very happy childhood. My mom and dad used to work till late earlier, but I stayed with my grandparents. My grandparents are still alive, touch wood.
And they are loving
They're
grandparents?
loving. I love them. I really care for them. And when I was 5 or 6, even mom left her job to start freelancing from home. So then even mom was there, and eventually even dad started working from home. So family life was never an issue for me.
What prompted you to do this? What was there a struggle with yourself sometime?
I struggled with my identity, especially because I was bullied quite a bit, even at military school. Aside from the actual punishments, which was the regularly mandated punishments, there were people who used to tease me for the way I walk, the way I talk, when I can't play a particular game.
What do you mean walk and talk?
So in military school, you need to be a man's man, very masculine persona, macho persona, while there were many aspects of me that were feminine. That's when my struggle with my sexuality started. Eventually, I did come out as bisexual, but that would take many, many more years.
When did that struggle begin?
At age 12 or 13, when
At age 12 or 13, you were confused about your
Yeah.
sexuality.
when I joined military school, that confusion went on for a while, and military school sort of gave a setback because even though admittedly I said that no, there's nothing wrong with it, inside I always felt that there was, because I had heard so many bad things being said about it.
When you say struggle with sexuality, did you struggle with the fact that here you were projecting yourself as a heterosexual male when actually you were in fact gay, or because or did you find that you were attracted to both?
I always knew I was attracted to women. That was never a question. The thing about my attraction to men also stems, the confusion about it also stems from the fact that most men I have met in my life have been grade A assholes. I mean, my dad is great, Dadu is great. I'm talking about outside of family. Younger brother is great. Friends, I have had terrible experiences with boys in general.
So you weren't able to convince yourself that you know
Yeah.
that I should be attracted to
Yeah,
men.
especially military school where there were so many boys and I just felt horrible all the time. I mean, I did have friends there, but the constant stress, the constant punishments, and eventually even the bullying, and I was called a variety of homophobic and transphobic slurs.
Did you come out in military school?
No, I didn't. I came out in college.
In military school, were you ever attracted to men?
I did have a physically intimate relationship with two boys. We didn't have any sort of emotional connection at all, but the physicality of it was there. And to be fair, I did enjoy it. And so that's where the confusion began,
What was the confusion?
whether I am attracted to men at all or not, because they still present themselves as heterosexual, they still believe they're heterosexual, and they may be heterosexual because that was also a stage where people love experimenting, and it's healthy to experiment at that age when you're just getting into puberty.
So you thought it was an experiment even for yourself,
Yeah,
right?
even for myself, even at that age I thought that yeah, this is just an experiment. For me, my sexuality is also tied intimately to the kind of person I am being intimate with, because most guys were complete buffoons. I never really considered myself bisexual until of course college happened, and I realized that coming into my own, presenting the feminine side of me, presenting as bisexual, makes me feel a lot more confident, a lot more comfortable. So like the only battles I'm fighting are externally, internally it's mostly homeostasis.
So did your cutting stop when you came to terms with the fact that you were comfortable now with your sexuality? Did it stop?
Unfortunately, it isn't that linear because my cutting was never exactly tied to my sexuality. My cutting usually happened because of external stressors, and even now in high stress environments, when I'm being overworked or when I'm headed for a burnout, I start feeling the urge to cut again and again, but now I manage.
We are going to talk about why we are here discussing you cutting yourself today, and which is, if there are any children out there who are doing it, perhaps they'll find some meaning and stop. When you have to stop, what do you do? And how can a child stop?
Raise the alarm. You need to have people in your life you can confide in, be it a teacher, someone from your peer group, preferably not peer group because they're not as experienced, but it can be a teacher, your parents, your grandparents, a relative, an older cousin.
But you couldn't do that, so how should they do it?
I couldn't do that mainly because there was no one to tell me. For them, I'm telling them right now.
Right, that's important.
Even when you feel like you don't need help, there are times that you do.
But something inside will tell you that you need help and you need to seek it.
Yeah.
Right? If not at the home environment, then you need to reach out to a teacher. You need to reach out to someone.
Actually, the most suitable thing to do when you have a sense of mental distress is make a support network of other people facing similar issues. like whenever someone of that group is spiraling, the others know that experience intimately because they have been through it.
Do you feel the urge to do it now?
I do occasionally, and yes, I wouldn't say the urge is any weaker, but I've learned to deal with it.
How?
So it's either delay, distraction, or discussion, or the final all alarms blaring. So my first response would be to just push it further and further away by talking about other things with friends, with family, playing games, or lying in bed. Mostly that's my coping mechanism, just curling up in bed under the sheets for a while until the urge passes, because the urge eventually passes. Doesn't take more than a few hours usually.
That's important. Important to note, the urge will pass.
The worst of the worst urges may stay for a day, but no more than that. 90% of the time, both for people who are attempting suicide and for people who want to self-harm, delaying works. There is a TED talk by a man called Kevin Briggs, and he was a patrol officer on the Golden Gate Bridge. And he saved hundreds of lives of people who were trying to commit suicide by just talking to them, by just hearing them out. He lost only 2. This is a very important point. When someone calls you up that they're about to cut themselves, they're about to hurt themselves, the best thing to do is just let them blabber on and on till the urge passes. Distract only works if you know the person intimately, you know what else they're interested in. So you start talking about that to divert the chain of thought. Discussion happens when you want to talk about why they want to do this, or talk about the issue specifically to
Which
resolve
should be
that.
done by experts, you think?
Usually, yes.
Yes.
So the discussion, leave it up to your therapist, your psychologist.
Or reach out to one if you don't have
definitely.
one, right?
So if this stage has gone past delay and distraction, if even distracting yourself hasn't worked and the urge is that strong that you just want to hurt yourself, but even if you want to hurt yourself at all, reaching out to a mental health professional is absolutely imperative, because people do not know how to deal with it.
That brings me to a very, very important question. Is cutting yourself attempting suicide?
No.
Why?
Majority of the time it's not with the aim of attempting suicide. Anyone who is a veteran depressed person would tell you that cutting yourself to kill yourself is successful only 6% of the time.
I don't even want to know why you know those figures, but
Also, cutting yourself, people might do it with the intention of killing themselves. Then yes, it is attempting suicide. But if it is not with the intention of killing yourself, if it's just to hurt yourself, then it's not.
so you did not have an
I
intention to
did
commit
not.
suicide.
I did not have an intention to commit suicide when I cut myself. I did attempt suicide last year, end of last year, due to a host of reasons that I don't want to get into right now. But it was by means of overdosing on prescription medication.
What could be that difficult in life that makes you want to give up?
At the end of the day, it's just a sense of loneliness. When you feel like you don't want to reach out to anybody, when the desire to reach out, the desire to seek help goes, that's when you feel like, hey, let's end it all here. Again, there needs to be a constant voice telling yourself that that's not an option.
Has your inner voice changed? Does it affirm positivity?
Definitely, because in November, after that experience, after having, oh God, did I almost die? I don't even know how close to death I was, but it was a horrific experience. It was painful, miserable, and I realized this is not actually what I want. Because
So then why did you do it?
I thought it was what I wanted before the fact, but after the fact I realized that I have so much to live for. It's like, I'll give you another statistic. Again, any veteran depressed person has researched suicide methods. People who commit suicide by jumping off places, of bridges or tall buildings, all those who have survived, all of them have said that the first thought they had after jumping was, I don't want to do this. and it was already too late because they were mid-air. That is actually something I realized.
Did you feel that?
After I overdosed, I definitely felt that.
You shouldn't have done it.
Because I called my own rescue. So I called up my therapist and said, listen, XYZ has happened. Because immediately after
Your first response, your first go-to was your therapist.
My first go-to was actually a friend who I called all dramatic to say goodbye. But then the friend rang the alarm bell, listen, call the therapist. So thankful to that friend for practically saving my life. But then when I rang all the alarm bells slowly, I started to realize that this is definitely not the way I want to go, and definitely not the time I want to go. Because it's not human nature to want to kill yourself. If you want to kill yourself, then that's not all right. It's not something to be ashamed of. There's no shame in having depression or suicidal tendencies, but it's definitely not something you can get used to and live with.
You know all this. You're an intelligent fellow. Ambuj.
I'm a psychology student.
Yes,
it would be.
and you're studying psychology.
Yeah.
And my question to you is, what made you think that it was okay to do it? And the impact that you would have, whether it was your parents, whether it was your friends.
When one is going through such a emotionally tumultuous time, it is impossible. And I wouldn't even say difficult, but impossible to think of anything but yourself. It's like if you've been shot and you're bleeding out. Can you think of anything but the bullet wound? It's that, but emotionally. You're emotionally being drained, you're emotionally hurt, in pain, writhing. And during that time, if someone says, think of your family, think of your friends, doesn't make that much of a difference. And usually the way you save someone from that very edge is A, prevention is better than cure. Don't let them get to that edge. And B, just stay with them physically. Ensure that they don't hurt themselves. That's why in psychiatric institutions there's a 24/7 watch on inmates.
I like the analogy that you've drawn with a bleeding person, because that's what it is. You are emotionally bleeding, and unfortunately we don't give it that much importance.
Of course not. That's again a reason why self-harm happens, because if you go to a person saying, listen, I'm in immense pain and need help, they'll most probably ignore you, or say get over it, or say it's normal, everyone faces it. But then if you cut yourself up and you're bleeding, it's a much more dramatic image to present. So I think to a level this is also the responsibility of the caregiver to pay heed to cries for help.
When you talk about distract, when you talk about delay, discussion, there's also a way to channelize all the negative pent-up emotion. How do you do that?
For me it's music. So something you do as a hobby, just do it therapeutically. I used to write poetry. I stopped doing it as a hobby when I started performing spoken word at slams, at events. So now it's not just a hobby for me, it's something I work on and put effort into. So that doesn't work in a therapeutic manner, because when you start making something into a more professional activity, you start critically analyzing your work a lot more, and that won't work when you're going through a dark time. When you're channelizing something into your hobby, just do it for the sake of doing it. That's when I pick up my guitar and just strum for a bit, or pick a few notes, or play a backing track and play over it. Sometimes I sing. That really helps channelize the energy. And after things have settled down, you've gone through your depressive period, I think the best way is to tell your story like I'm doing right now.
Yes, and we hope that your story can encourage other people to stop, encourage other people to just wait, let it pass. Ambuj, we need an assurance that you will not ever think of it again.
Again, I may think of it because I don't control my own mind. Yeah, I won't do it because...
You won't do it.
There is a line between thinking and doing, and I always try my best never to cross that line.
I'm no one to tell you what to do, but today make a commitment to us that you will never ever think about attempting suicide again.
I make a commitment to you guys, but most of all to myself, that
yes,
You know, it's really not worth it. The cutting, even to people who are watching, I would like to say that the self-harm, the permanent scars you're getting, it's really, really not worth it.
What is that one message that you'd like to send out?
So, experimenting with self-harm is like experimenting with heroin. You do not do it. It's very addictive and very, very dangerous. And it's not worth it at all. The momentary relief you will feel is not worth the permanent scars. I mean, yes, people will tell you your scars are beautiful, and yes, you should accept people who already have them. Making those marks on your body will have a lasting impact on your life, which is not worth the heartache. Other than that, for me, planning to complete my master's in psychology, and
That's excellent, and congratulations about that.
thank you. I still haven't passed bachelor, so no counting chickens before they hatch.
It will happen. I'm sure it will happen, and you'll be able to share a lot more experience with us on Zen-Brain.
Because then I'll be able to come in as a mental health professional.
Absolutely, absolutely. And who better to give advice to somebody when you've been through it already? I'd like to thank you for sharing your journey. It couldn't have been easy.
Thank you for having me.
No, it couldn't have been easy. It's not easy to open up. One of the reasons why we started Zen-Brain was also to get India to talk about emotional health. You know, almost mental health is almost taboo because of the name that it has, right? But emotional stress is something that we deal with on a daily basis. It's time we talked about it. So that's important. And thank you for giving it a voice. And at Zen-Brain, we also believe that it's never ever too late to rewire your brain, rewire your thoughts. And that's what you have done so successfully. And we wish you the very best. And we hope, hearing this interview, a lot of kids out there will be inspired to rewire themselves too.
Let's hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.